Now that we have an opportunity to look at our new lords, what skills they have, and what talents they bring to your campaigns, I would like to go over each and every one and potentially explain some skills or even faction effects that they're bringing to the table so that you can better understand how to play these characters when they come out. We'll begin with Markus Wulfhart. Markus Wulfhart, otherwise known by his title of Hunt Marshal, is Karl Franz's captain of scouts who fights at the head of his elite unit of expert huntsmen, known as Wulfhart's Hunters, consisting of a unique ragtag band of trappers, trackers, archers, and scouts hailing from the many states and provinces of the Empire and beyond. Their mission is brutally simple: the utter destruction of the myriad beasts that terrorize and murder Imperial citizens, with extreme prejudice and taking absolutely no prisoners along the way, all in the Emperor's name. You can see his new icon. Now, that creature that you're looking at is the Drakwold Cyclops, a creature that destroyed the village of Markus Wulfhart when he was a young man. He tracked it down and he killed it, so it's a nice little effect to have that right over there. Faction effects here. Limited roster. Only basic units are immediately recruitable. We're talking about spearmen, swordsmen, archers, and free company militia. Whatever elite cornerstone units that you have in your army, you'll want to care for them in the very beginning because you won't be able to easily replace them. You'll only be able to recruit those very few units in the very beginning. But as you can see here, reinforcements will come from the Empire and they'll bring more powerful units to bolster your armies. You'll get Imperial supplies at set intervals, and that's really the way that you unlock them over time by increasing your acclaim, which I'll talk more about later on. Next, we'll talk about hostile actions that will result in retaliation from local factions, but will also empower your own armies. This means you'll get better Imperial supplies, they'll come more frequently, and also, not only that, your enemies will potentially be stronger in combat. We're talking about buffs to their leadership, maybe their weapon strength, but you'll also have to deal with a few other issues too, like public order problems, because you're ticking off the locals, which pleases your people back at home, but naturally those that you're dealing with in the jungles of Lustria will not be happy because of that. And naturally, you have the Hunter Lord, who is a lot like Markus Wulfhart, but more generic in case you want to make your own. Whenever you recruit them under this faction, they'll have +3 to their rank, meaning that they'll begin at level 4 at the very least, and that's really good. That's not really counting any other potential level increasing benefits that you might accrue during your campaign. And of course, our final faction effect, which only makes sense here. Your diplomatic relations with all lizardmen is down by 40. There's a lot of lizardmen nearby. Over in the Vortex campaign, well, we'll talk about that in a little bit once we go to the map positions. We'll talk about where you begin and who you begin by. That will certainly determine what you do in the very beginning of your campaign. And of course, Markus Wulfhart has no mount option and prefers to remain on foot while firing at his enemies. Trust me, he doesn't need a mount. And once we go over his other skills, you'll understand why. Markus Wulfhart is incredibly powerful, and I think a lot of you will be impressed with him. Now let's move over to Lord effects. Ambush defense up by 50% for his Lord's army, so only his army, and that applies to every Lord effect here, as the name might imply, but I just wanted to be clear on that. Your chance to succeed at an ambush also goes up by 50%. So for Markus Wulfhart, it'll be nigh impossible to ambush him, but his chance to ambush will potentially succeed almost every single time. If you build towards ambushing further, whether it's with a follower or it's with your skills, you'll be able to ambush anyone and everyone. That means you'll be able to choose and pick your battles and how you want to fight them too. And naturally, the upkeep for your archers and huntsman units goes down by 50%. So your cheap units, your archers, are going to be very cheap in the very beginning. Once you get your more elite archers, your huntsmen, they'll be even cheaper too. Clearly, there's a ranged theme that will be coming with Markus Wulfhart. And finally, you have your Amber Bow, a quest item. That's your magical bow that will unlock some very powerful capabilities once you have it. That'll provide its own quest line, but that is his only unique item that he's known to have. Now let's talk a little bit about our starting locations for Markus Wulfhart in the Vortex and Mortal Empire's campaign. In the Vortex campaign, you begin in a location called the Temple of Lincoln. To the east, you have Chotek, which comes with it a Lizardman faction, the very first one you're set up to fight, which is going to be Laxland based off of the location of where these units are at. Then over to the southwest, you have the Temple of Kara and the High Sentinel further to the east. These are Savage Orc locations, which belong to the Blue Vipers. Further to the south, you've got more Lizardmen from that same faction that you're fighting to the east. And to the north, you have Port Reaver. If you remember, that's where the New World colonies are located. They're going to be your only real friendly face out here, so it's very important to take care of them. They actually may even have a new town now over in Swamp Town, so they'll be a little bit tougher than they were before. And to the northeast of Port Reaver, you have Skeggi. Skeggi is going to belong to, of course, Norsemen, and they may even have more power than before by holding more land in the very beginning. Mazdamundi is somewhere caught up there dealing with all of them. But that is your beginning position for the Vortex campaign. Now we can look at the Mortal Empires map and see how that changes up. But you do begin in the Scorpion Coast here, which is a location that is only comprised of 2 towns, the Temple of Lincoln and Chotek, which belongs to Lizardmen over to the east. The Mortal Empires map doesn't change up too much, outside of really putting you in a much more troubling predicament. You no longer have the New World colonies nearly as close to you. In fact, you have an obstacle between your 2 factions. You've got the Vampire Coast, that faction of the Drowned, with that very ghostly lady up there. Then over to the west, you have the Savage Orcs, who are going to be again a blockade for you. And the Lizard Boys are still down to the south over in the Creeping Jungle. To the east, you have directly right over there a Vampire Coast Mutineers faction if we look at the previous placement of factions. So you'll be more isolated than you are in the Vortex campaign. That could either provide more of a challenge or just more room for expansion depending on how you play and approach it all. But that's really it for all of our locational information that we really need to look at. We can look at unique skills now. Our very first one, Best of the Best. You get a +2 recruit rank for all units. As your Acclaim goes up and your Imperial supplies become better, they'll send you more veteran troops. So if you stack that with your Best of the Best ability, you'll have elite troops from the very beginning whenever new soldiers come over. Next, we have Impervious to Attack. It's largely a defensive ability. I could say that you could potentially tank some ranged attacks, which you could use for offensive plans if you would like to. If you would like to use Markus to potentially shield your archers if you kind of have a skirmishing battle going on. It also provides a +10 to melee defense and that negation of 10% missile damage too. Then we move on to Master Survivalist. That's a really good one. It's multifaceted. You get a campaign movement range upped by 5%. Considering you only need that tiny sliver more in order to either outrun or to catch your enemies, that will be quite handy, especially when you count it with your campaign movement skill that you can also get on that blue skill tree line. You get a campaign line of sight up by 10%. Again, having enemies come out of the fog or out of your line of sight to attack you will probably not be possible under Markus Wulfhart. And finally, you have casualty replenishment rate up by 10%. It's good to note that he's actually okay with the climate in Lustria, so it won't be as difficult for him, but that will still be a huge strength for him to have. You'll be able to come back after each fight at near full power or closer to it because of your casualty replenishment rate. Then we have Irregular Elite. The upkeep for your Huntsman and Archer units goes down by a further 15%. If you remember, we spoke about how that upkeep was going down before. Now it's going down even more. So your Huntsmen and Archers will be dirt cheap for you. Your melee attack for your Huntsman goes up by +8. We could speculate and potentially surmise that maybe Huntsmen are not only better archers, but maybe they can engage and scrap a little bit in melee combat, a little bit like your free militia company can. Then you have +10% missile damage for Huntsman and Archer units. What a very powerful ability. I mean, that completely changes how powerful your Archers and Huntsmen are, but it's only for your Lord's army. Then we move over to Sleight of Hand. Double shot ammo, extra projectiles for Huntsman units, so they'll be able to deal even more damage, especially with a reload time reduction, furthering their damage output, their damage per second, or their DPS. So they're going to be your elite unit that I'm sure that you use to take on, well, tough elite enemies. Then we further have a new benefit for Markus Wulfhart called Telescopic Aim, giving him a further range of 12%. Not only that, he gets Sundering attacks. -30 to enemy armor is incredible. So if they have low armor, they'll have no armor. If they have a lot of armor, that will negate a big chunk of their armor, meaning that all of your ranged units can deal more damage. Keep in mind, whenever there's a spellcaster coming to fight you, your ranged units can easily focus fire on them and destroy them. So now with Sundering attacks, you can do even more damage to that unit if they even have a little bit of armor. Then finally, you have Grand Hunt Marshal. Vanguard deployment for your entire army. So you can deploy pretty much wherever you want. If you want to ambush your foes, if you want to have a more unique formation because you're not stuck on one side, you can do that. Then you have Immune to Psychology. You're not worried about fear or terror. Those large creatures will not impact Marcus's army. Other armies won't have that benefit. We don't really know yet, but at the very least, Markus Wulfhart will not have to worry about fear and terror. His units are immune to that psychology damage or that psychological damage that you usually accrue, so I wouldn't really worry about leadership nearly as much. And that covers a lot of what we need to know about Markus Wulfhart. And just as a reminder, Acclaim is the progress you make towards fulfilling the Emperor's mandate. By expanding, building, or upgrading ports, or even unlocking special characters, you can increase your Acclaim. That leads to better quality reinforcements that you're sent in intervals. And hostility is the current level of aggression that the enemy has towards you. So the higher that is, the more pleased people are back at home, which will help out your Imperial supplies. But locally, you'll deal with public order problems, and you'll deal with stronger enemies too. Let's move on to Nakai now. Nakai the Wanderer. He may appear to be a wizened Kroxigor ancient, but his near-silent demeanor masks a warrior of tremendous stature. Indeed, he is arguably the finest exponent of single combat ever spawned. Nakai earned his epithet due to his solitary nature, for instead of pledging himself to a single temple city, he goes wherever the Great Plan deems it necessary. Whenever the lizardmen are in dire need, when catastrophe threatens their existence, he is revered by the skinks who adorn him with tokens of his many battles fought in preservation of his race, and the furtherance of the Great Plan. Now to go over the faction effects for Nakai. Nakai's Horde unlocks units, while other Hordes use global recruitment to get access to them, meaning that you don't need to rebuild the same redundant buildings on each Horde. You only need Nakai to unlock them, and your other Hordes you might create later on can pick them up via global recruitment. That saves a lot of time. Nakai's vassals occupy the settlements conquered. More settlements controlled come with increasing rewards. So whenever you conquer these locations, it'll go directly to the defenders of the Great Plan. After that, you can dedicate it to one of the 3 gods they have featured in here. The more you do so, the more rewards you'll accrue, like new units and other things like that. Then we have a recruit rank +3 for Kroxigor Ancients. Naturally, being that he's a ancient Kroxigor himself, he's going to increase their rank right at recruitment, so you'll have like a rank 3 or 4 Kroxigor Ancient from the very beginning. Now for particular Lord effects. +5 to melee defense for Kroxigor and Sacred Kroxigor units. Again, a great way to buff all of them up in your army. That's going to be a cornerstone of your army. Recruitment cost for them goes down by a further 10%. These only apply to his own army, not every other army around, because it's a Lord effect, not a faction effect. And of course, you get no mount. You do have 2 items here, the Golden Tributes. So the Golden Tributes will just be all the many trinkets you get from your skinks and other things that you've picked up over like the 1,000 years or more that you've been fighting. Then the Ogham Shard. The Ogham Shard is from Albion. It's a special waste stone created by the Truthsayers or Druids there that is able to channel and harness the winds of magic. So because of that, it should be related to potential magical defense or other benefits like that too. Now for the beginning location for Nakai the Wanderer. For the Vortex campaign, you begin over by the Monument of Izatal. To the south, you have Quitax, to the east, Chakwa. These 3 locations will have Skaven enemies for you to fight, which might be a prudent choice early on, considering that Wulfhart will easily have veteran armies to counter you with. Up to the north, as the 3rd part of the Creeping Jungle Province, you have Longsla. That location is just a ruin, so you could potentially give it to your vassal for some extra money early on. To the northwest of those ruins, you have Savage Orcs, the Blue Vipers, and you'll be dealing with them early on too. To the east at Laxlin, you've got some Lizardmen friends that you could potentially team up with if you need to. As further to the north of them, you have the beginning location for Markus Wulfhart at the Temple of Lincoln, and that's all over in the Scorpion Coast. And now we can move on to the Mortal Empire's map, where things really do change up for our friend Nakai. While I can't be too sure what the names are, based on what we can see by the delineations on Albion, there will be 3 locations for you to conquer, providing a nice base of operations where you can then platform to a multitude of directions. Maybe if you wanted to, you could go over to the Dark Elven lands to the west, you could go to the east where the Norsemen are. That might be challenging. It's very likely that your initial enemies here will be Norsemen. They may potentially move some NPC Norse faction over here for you to fight. It won't be any of the core player ones like Wulfric or Throg, but there's many NPC factions that they can easily create or move over to Albion for your initial threat. So that'll be a pretty easy beginning in comparison to your start over in the Vortex campaign. I feel like the Vortex campaign will potentially be more difficult, even though you're isolated up here on your own over in Albion. Because then you could go over to go fight the Norsemen, you could go fight the Bretonnians, even the Empire. You do have options to pick and choose, and if they want to come to you, they've got to sail over to your land of Albion and come at you. Now, you are a horde army, but you can create vassals. That's a core part of your gameplay here. You give each location over to the Defenders of the Great Plan, and they give you vassal income per turn. So let's say you get 100 or 200 per settlement. If you conquer 3, that could be 300 or even 600 gold per turn added to your horde income. So that does begin to add up over time, and you don't have to worry about defending or converting things. They can do it for you. You just have to move on. So focusing on campaign movement and replenishment will be vital for any campaign for Nakai the Wanderer. I mean, he is called the Wanderer, and he wandered pretty far. Now let's go over his skills and conclude our video. Now to look at Nakai's unique skills, the very first one is all about commanding, Legendary Warrior. His leadership aura size is up by 20%. It's that blue aura around your commander or one of your units that you have. And he provides +5 to leadership, making his army even harder to break. He's got another skill here called Demon Crusher, which lends me to believe that his theme in Mortal Empires is to fight chaos. He gets a charge bonus of 10% and a weapon strength of +10%. It also brings the New World over to the Old World too, so that's going to be a nice big change. That makes him just a little bit beefier and tougher in combat. Then we have Cold-Blooded Reflexes. Attacks cause Discouraged effect, reducing leadership, and he's able to cause terror, meaning that not only is he going to reduce leadership, he'll be able to strike terror into them, causing them to flee. His leadership impact will be huge on the battlefield. I believe when it comes to low leadership units, they'll flee quickly from him. Then we can come over here. We've got First Spawning, plus 10% speed for his entire army, meaning that you can clash with the enemy's line a bit faster. Probably a good trait to have whenever fighting Markus Wulfhart, who doesn't want you to clash with him. Then he's got a new ability from First Spawning called Frenzy for Kroxigor and Sacred Kroxigor units. Then later we have Adornment. Casualty replenishment goes up by 5% for his Lord's army, and his horde growth goes up by 3 as well. Then we have the Sacred Wanderer. He will never break. He'll fight till the very last, a lot like Ungrim the Dwarf Slayer. And that'll conclude our video. If you enjoyed this video, do not forget to leave a like down below and to share it with your friends too. If it helps them out, hey, that's a great thing, and I'm very happy about it. So I may be doing a video about forts, their lore, and what they're all about very soon. We did get a blog post for that, and if you would like to see that, let me know down below in the comments. I really do read all of your feedback, so don't forget to leave a comment down below. And a big shout out to all of my patrons, and look forward to an incredible new game. So enjoy, everyone, and until then.